car crash cases, defective products, dangerous drugs, injuries, and abuse. Across the state of Alabama, the attorneys, proudly sponsored by the law firm of Hollis Wright, are here to serve you. Your tough legal questions answered by our experts. The attorneys with Josh Wright from the law firm of Hollis Wright and host David Lamb.
Good evening and welcome into the attorneys. Thank you so much for joining us on this Sunday evening. We always appreciate whenever you stop by. For the next half hour, we have a really interesting show that is incredibly timely. More details about that on the way. We have a panel of experts ready to deal with this topic that we believe is of interest. The best way for this show to go tonight is for you to join in our conversation. You'll see ways you can do that at the bottom of your screen. Also, Hollis Wright, they make available attorneys who are standing by live each and every Sunday evening during the show to speak with you. It's a live, off-air, confidential conversation. So if you need some free legal advice tonight during the course of the show, just give them a call. Josh Wright is the managing partner of the firm of Hollis Wright, leading our conversation. Good to see you. And I don't think we've covered this before. This topic.
I think it's a new topic, and you know we've done over 250 some shows, and every once in a while we'll add a new topic. And what's great about this, I'll introduce Catherine to start. Catherine Harrington, who's a former partner of mine, works at the Henniger Garrison Davis firm here in town. We were actually in a meeting about 6 weeks ago, and she asked me if we'd ever done a show on kind of defamation and libel and slander. And I said, no, but you would be perfect on it. And she goes, no. And she said, all right, well, maybe I think about this. And sure enough, 6 weeks later, we got her on the show. So first of all, welcome.
Thank you, Josh.
Catherine and I work together at our law firm. Catherine helped start our law firm that I'm at today, and she's moved on to other areas, but we've always been dear friends, and we work on cases together, and she's an expert in this area, and it really is a unique area, and how relevant in today's society where all the defamation and libel and slander cases are going on. It's a really interesting topic, and I think the viewing audience will be amazed. You can get yourself into trouble by making the wrong comment to the wrong person very, very quickly. So first of all, welcome for being on, or glad you're on. Tell me this. How did you get in this area of the law? Because there are not a lot of lawyers that are involved in this specialty. I know you do a lot of other things too, but this is a specialty and kind of a niche.
Well, as things typically happen in law, you know, you don't really see something coming necessarily, and it's not a subject of the law that I sought out, but a friend came to me who later became a client who was the victim of a social media, kind of an onslaught of very hateful comments, and asked me what solution she might have available to her as a victim of this. And I began looking into it. It's a little bit different on social media than you would think in a newspaper, but I found that the law that typically applies to libel, if someone said something in a newspaper or took out an ad in a newspaper that was hateful and untrue and damaged an individual's reputation, that applies to social media as well. So the same thing that would apply to a newspaper, or if you were making an oral statement, applies to social media. Internet, tweets, even emojis and hashtags can be interpreted under the law as a form of defamation. So there are very specific definitions, of course.
It's fascinating when you start to think about that. And as technology changes, the law changes. You know, one of the interesting things, Catherine, that I find is, you know, we do, I think, a good job as parents in helping raise our children, but a lot of us are not super tech savvy, right? We're not nearly as tech savvy as our kids are, and trying to instill in a child, for example, even that may be a minor, that there are some things that they can say and do on social media that can have really lasting implications, not just personally and relationship-wise, but also legally. And so I know that's something that is out there.
Well, that's especially true, and I'm glad you raised the question about children and parents. You often hear the phrase, words have consequences, but how often do we really, really stop and think about what those consequences might be? If you're a parent and you have a teenage child who gets a little carried away and starts saying things that are not true about another individual on the internet, on an email that many people might be on, an email list, on tweet, it can damage the reputation of that person, be very hurtful, And if the parent doesn't step in and take action once they are aware of it, they too can be held responsible for actually the defamation that their child engaged in.
And that is really fascinating. It's concerning as a parent, because you never really know whether or not you could be responsible for the actions of your child. I know a question that we have gotten before on the show is, are only businesses liable for slander and libel, or can individuals be liable for it too? I think you've kind of unpackaged that a little bit, but it can be anybody, can't it?
Right, it can be anyone. And you think oftentimes that, well, defamation is really about public figures talking bad about each other, or a public figure saying something about a politician. That's a completely different standard. And yes, that happens, and they have a little bit higher bar to meet when it comes to defamation. But if you're an individual and you speak about a third person in a way that is false, and can be shown to be false, and has a negative impact on that individual in the community, then you may be held liable. And the damages, you don't have to prove, the victim of this does not have to prove actual money damages. It's the damage to their personal reputation that a jury may take into account. And there have been some very substantial awards, especially when there were things that were extremely hurtful. I'll give you a sort of a generic example. And it is generic, but it's based on an actual case where it was published by an individual about a woman who was in a very bad car accident, and it was indicated that that woman was drinking and caused the death of her child. And that was not true. The car accident happened, the child died, there was no drinking. And there was a very large award because of the emotional impact of saying that you caused the death of your child. And that had been reposted. And when you post and it's reposted, it can go thousands of times. And it's hard to undo that. As we often say, you can't unring that bell.
Yeah, we with social media in today's world, it's amazing how fast something can go to Facebook or even Instagram and be reposted and reposted and reposted, and all of a sudden it gets away. As Catherine said, you can't unring the bell.
One of the things that's disconcerting to me, the political discourse, it just seems to have gone off the rails. If somebody believes different than you, then you can just rip them to shreds, and it happens on both sides, and it just gets kind of crazy. Might this and the law be catching up and be a way so that people are held more accountable? Because there are times, there are almost campaigns against individuals something that's in the news now, someone that was kicked out of a restaurant, and that worked for President Trump. Some folks did not like her, some folks did, so now there's a battle. The restaurant is either getting praised on like reviews and Yelp reviews, or absolutely getting decimated. So might the law help hold folks accountable to what you say and what you say online?
Well, that's an interesting question, because there's some legal arguments that are coming out now that the platforms such as Facebook and Twitter ought to have more responsibility for themselves for what they allow people to publish.
Right.
When the internet first came out and our country was trying to promote it, the internet highway as they used to say, Congress passed a series of laws that really gave the internet and the social networks immunity.
Okay.
Not total immunity, but they are not responsible for what I put on there if I have created that document and put it on Facebook.
Okay.
Or I make a statement on Facebook and Facebook has nothing to do with it. And I use Facebook because it's one of the most prominent of social medias. There's Snapchat and others as well. It's been suggested that if Congress would make these social media organizations more responsible to warn the users about defamatory comments, and also have some responsibility to control these statements, then that would dampen down and be more of a deterrent than we have right now.
Interesting.
I know we're getting ready to go to break. When we come back, I want to talk about how do you know if you've been a victim of this, but I also want to unwrap just a little bit. Catherine addressed it, but I want to talk a little bit more about how public figures, you can say certain things about public figures you could never say against an individual, and there are certain different standards that we can talk about.
Good. All right. We're stepping aside our first break of the evening. As we do so, a reminder how you can join our conversation. I'm sure this is sparking some questions with you. We'd love to hear them. Get in touch with us. You see us right there. Also, timely, Hollis Wright on social media, Facebook, Twitter, Instagram. Find them there. Actually a great educational resource, so check them out. Stay tuned. More of the attorneys coming right up.
I'm Josh Wright with the law firm of Hollis Wright, a personal injury law firm. Thank you for watching The Attorneys. Now, we hope you, a friend, or a loved one never needs legal counsel for a case. But if you do, the goal of the show is simple. Provide answers and legal counsel when you need it the most. Your call to the show is free, so if you have questions specific to the show or related to other accident or injury-related topics, you can call, email, or text us. Or you can also follow us on Facebook or Twitter, or simply contact us by going to hollis-wright.com and click on the Contact Us link. We know your time is valuable, so thank you for spending it with us watching The Attorneys.
Be careful what you share. Welcome back into The Attorneys, talking about social media defamation, a fascinating topic tonight. We'd love to have you join the conversation. That information on the screen that you see there. Also, if you need some free, confidential, all-fair legal advice, attorneys from Hollis Wright are standing by live. Josh?
All right, so when we went to break, a couple things I want to talk about in this segment. One is, as a public figure, people can say more aggressive things that may be considered slander or libel against an individual, but as a public figure, you kind of expose yourself to some of that, don't you?
Yes, you do, and there's a very specific legal definition of who a public figure may be. And typically, it's someone who holds themselves out to participate in a very politically, situation or a public circumstance that is widely regarded as public. It's a legal definition, so a judge would ultimately make the decision as to whether the public figure standard applied. And what the public figure standard is different than if I was to say something as a private citizen about a third party who is also simply a private citizen, versus if I said something about a congressman or woman or the president, for example. They're considered public figures because they have thrust themselves into the public domain, and thus if I said something defamatory about them that was false, it would have to be provably false, and it would have to be proven that I knew in advance that what I was going to say and what I said was false, and I did it with actual malice. Malice meaning just to be mean.
Yeah.
So I said something that was a lie, and I said it to be mean. Now, you don't hear about many defamation cases involving the public. As we saw in debates, there were a lot of nasty things thrown about because it really just drags the whole issue out longer. It's a difficult standard of proof, and consequently, it doesn't happen very often.
So let me ask you a question. I think this is a really interesting area of this law. Let's assume somebody engages in libel or slander, and they're called on it. And let's say, they realize, all right, hold on, I should not have said that. I should not have posted that. Is there an ability for that individual to retract what they have done, admit they were wrong, and insulate themselves from being responsible for it.
Yes, the law does provide for that. That's why it's important that if you feel like you're a victim of defamation on social media or anything, you really need to contact a lawyer and at least get the basic advice, because it's important to send a letter to the offending person within a certain period of time under the law and say, I'm asking you to retract that statement. If they do it, then they can be insulated from punitive damages for having made the statement. If they refuse, then you've warned them, you've given them an opportunity to retract it. A jury can award punitive damages, meaning damages that do not have to be proven as to compensate you for an actual loss, but just to deter them. Also, there's a requirement that you might be required to send a cease and desist letter saying, I am asking you to stop this. And if you do that and it doesn't happen, they do not stop making the defamatory comments, that will also trigger punitive damages. And the longer they continue and the more persistent they are, the higher the damages can be.
So, David, that's always been a really interesting area. Catherine and I, as partners back in the day, engaged in some litigation. We actually received a couple of those letters related to a pretty significant case that we were involved in. And we had to do some research at the time, as I recall, about what are lawyers' responsibilities? Can they plead things in their pleadings that they deem to be accurate, but that have to be proven out through litigation? And we learned that there are some exceptions for lawyers. Doesn't mean lawyers can say anything, but in a pleading context, as long as they meet certain standards, they can plead certain things, even though it may not be accepted well and received well by the party on the other side. So, there are even lawyers are looking for these rules too to make sure, hey, are we doing something right, or do we need to retract something, and trying to make good judgment calls and decisions. And so this area of the law is complicated, and you don't want to do it alone. You want to have somebody alongside with you, like Catherine.
How much easier would life be for us all if you just follow the advice of stop and think before you tweet, post, and share? How much of what you run into, if folks would just take a step and realize the potential consequences of that?
Well, I think it would be good for everyone. A better example for our children. It would cause less stress on individuals. Lawsuits are very expensive.
They are.
And if you end up being a defendant in one of these lawsuits, it's very expensive, and then you have the stress of the exposure. There's no guarantee you are always right when you make certain statements. Right. I heard a very timely statement yesterday listening to the news when a commentator said, I was brought up to have the right to disagree, right, but not be disagreeable. And our social networks are wonderful ways to exchange ideas, but we can do it in an agreeable way and in a respectful way. Like I said at the very introduction, when you get down to the point that the law is looking at the kind of emojis that people are putting after statements they're making to determine if they are an indicator of malice or an intention to be especially hurtful, it's time to stop and think, why are we doing this, and what is our real intent?
Yeah. All right, so we're getting ready to go to break. When we come back, I want to focus our last segment on if you've been a victim, what are my legal rights? Okay. How do I file suit? How does a lawyer get compensated? How does the client get compensated? And kind of what those standards are. I think that's important so people
Good deal. We got a lot of ground left to cover. Stay tuned. We've got more of the attorneys coming right up.
I'm attorney Bobby Bell with Hollis Wright Law Firm. In today's world, social media is all around us. It is common for many people to post on social media regarding their life and activities on a daily basis. Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, and similar social media are a great way to stay connected to others and to share your experiences and thoughts. Some seemingly innocent social media posts, however, can have devastating effects if you're involved in litigation, especially in a personal injury claim, a contested divorce, or a child custody battle. Courts regularly allow adverse parties access to the other side's social media accounts, allowing relevant posts to be presented as evidence. These rules have allowed social media to become a hotbed of information in the litigation world. In fact, we are seeing more and more preservation orders issued by courts requiring you to collect and save any and all social media activity. Therefore, it's advisable that even before there's litigation, lawyers should advise their clients that social media content may be discoverable. Here are a few helpful tips. 1. Do not post anything about the case. This includes posts regarding conversations or meetings with your attorneys, remarks about your injuries, negative remarks about the opposing party. Do not post anything you would not want read in open court to either a judge or a jury. 2. Avoid new friend requests from people you do not know. Many law firms and insurance offices may attempt to have employees follow you on social media in an attempt to gain information. 3. Limit adding new photos, check-ins, photo tagging, etc. Seemingly innocent posts may be used against you. Regular check-ins at restaurants, parties, or other events with friends can cast doubt on any claims of loss of enjoyment of life, pain and suffering, or emotional distress, since you appear to be living life as usual. 4. Increase your privacy settings. Many social media sites frequently update and change their privacy settings. In the litigation context, it is possible you may have to preserve and present anything you posted. Therefore, we encourage you to be smart and careful when using social media. Please remember, your call, email, or text to the attorneys is free. All of us at Hollis Wright want to help answer your questions on real issues you face. Remember, a competent lawyer will respond to every question you send in. That's our pledge and promise to you. Thanks for watching The Attorneys on WVTM 13.
Welcome back into The Attorneys, our final segment here, just a few minutes remaining. So if you have a question, want to take advantage of the opportunity to speak with those attorneys standing by live, got a few minutes to do so, so pick up the phone and give them a call. Josh?
All right, so when we went to break, Catherine, one of the things we hadn't unwrapped yet is I want to unwrap this concept of, if there is litigation, how does someone get compensated for the wrongful conduct of a third party? How do lawyers get compensated in those cases, and how does this process work where someone can come to a lawyer and know that they're being protected?
Well, there's several different ways. Let's talk about the individuals first. It's possible that an individual's homeowner policy may cover a defamation case. It depends on what's in the policy, and it depends on the circumstances, whether the statement was made in a manner that was so severe that it rises to the level of a criminal action, which is rare. But you only have to prove that it was a negligent action to be able to bring a lawsuit against an individual. And typically homeowners will cover negligent actions on the part of their insured. So that's one way. If it's a one person against another person and there's a homeowner's insurance policy, the offending person may have coverage there, and that's how the victim may be compensated. It's up to the lawyer to decide the best way for the relationship to go forward. Right. For the victim. The victim may want to pay an hourly rate for a small case, or the lawyer may determine it's a case that's worthy of taking it on a contingency basis. So each one of those can be different. Initially, when you go to a lawyer, most initial interviews are not charged. So the person can get a pretty quick read from a lawyer as to whether the case is sufficient to bring a defamation action. Businesses have a little bit different circumstance. If a business is the victim of defamation, and that happens quite often, then the offending business might have what's called an error and omissions policy. And that policy may kick in and cover the actions of the offending agent of the business. It's not uncommon that someone working for a business may use their business's logo and make a statement about a competing business that is false, defamatory of that business, causes them to lose business or harms the reputation of their business, and then the errors and omissions policy may kick in.
Aren't there circumstances where certain statements about either individuals or businesses rise to such a high level, like felony convictions, if you wrongly state somebody had that? Aren't there certain circumstances where if you say something like that, you can get additional damages than if it's less, if you will, less egregious of a defamation?
And that's almost a completely different program, because there are, it's a state-by-state statutory structure. And like for now, Alabama tried to pass a criminal defamation law to stop people from being so hateful and damaging, and it was declared unconstitutional. But there are other laws that are enforceable, such as harassment, and social media harassment is an enforceable crime. So yes, there are cases that rise way above that. I might add too that just saying, in my opinion, at the beginning of a statement is not necessarily a way to immunize oneself against a defamatory statement. You can't just tack that on the front and then say, well, I was just asserting an opinion.
Right. We're just about out of time. It's flown. Really interesting conversation. Catherine, would love just a final thought from you for our viewers on this topic.
Well, I would say that if you feel like you've been a victim of defamation, it's important, if you think it's a serious offense, that you contact a lawyer, that you find out what your alternatives are and what your rights are, and that you not be afraid to move forward if it's been an egregious action. That's the only way we can get the message out to people that this is no way to conduct ourselves in the society, that it should be respectful of the rights of all.
You know, David, I just say this. I brought Catherine on because she's an expert in this area, and we can get any viewer in touch with Catherine. It's not in the sweet spot of what we handle, but it is something that she handles. It takes a unique lawyer that understands this area of the law that can really be successful, and so we can get folks in touch with Catherine. I'd finish with this. We try to do a good job as parents, all of us, in teaching our children to gossip less, be involved in less cliques, be more inclusive. And I think if we continue to push that agenda, that really plays into this area, which is, you know, if you're not gossiping about somebody, you're not going to slander or libel them, but you can get yourself in trouble once you start to gossip. Mind your own beeswax. Remember that? I learned that when I was a kid, right? Sometimes that's the best approach. But at the end of the day, if you find yourself in a circumstance where you've either been a victim or you think you may have slandered or engaged in libel conduct, you need to get in touch with a lawyer like Catherine to be able to lead, guide, and direct you through the process, to be able to say, all right, here are your rights. Here's where we can go, and even if you need to retract, here's what you should do.
I think we did learn it all in kindergarten, right? If you don't have anything nice to say,
haven't we all learned that? Everything we learned in kindergarten.
We're still learning as we go.
That's right.
Yeah. Catherine, thanks for being with us.
You did a great job.
Appreciate you being with us. Appreciate you all being with us as well. Thanks so much for joining us. We'll look for you next time right here on The Attorneys.
Thanks for watching The Attorneys, sponsored by Hollis Wright.